through the formats of how this is going to work. We're going to ask each candidate to go through 3 minutes of an opening speech. Then I'm going to ask them questions from 5 different areas, which are Islamophobia and the far right, policy issues, particularly deprivation, London and international issues, counter-terrorism, and engagement with Muslims. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Boris Johnson for his 3-minute opening speech.
Okay. I should begin by saying to what I said to some of you yesterday, that it was almost exactly 100 years ago that my great-grandfather, my father's father's father, came to this city. All the cities he could have chosen, he came to this city in fear of his life, actually he arrived in Wimbledon for one reason or another, I can't remember, and he then, I'm afraid, went back to his country of origin, unfortunately, and was assassinated because he was an extremely incompetent politician. But he put down roots here, and it's thanks to that link with this country, with London, that I'm here at all. And I think he would have been amazed to discover that his great-grandson had become Mayor of London, as indeed I know some other people were amazed when I became Mayor of London 4 years ago. But I also think he would have been very proud because he was a Muslim, he knew the Quran off by heart, and my job as his great-grandson, as Mayor of London, is to make sure that this is a city where people can come and make their lives and achieve fantastic things, and where the Muslim community can prosper and flourish, as all communities can prosper. And number one is to make sure that we have a safe city, a wonderful city to live in, and that's why I'm concentrating so much on getting more police out on the street. We've got 1,000 more than there were when I was elected. I'm proud to say now that there are more, absolutely true. Was there some dissent from this side? It's absolutely true. 2,000 now going into the safer neighbourhood teams, and more BAME, more black, Asian, minority ethnic police officers than ever before in the history of the Metropolitan Police. That is the way to build links. That's the way to build a rapport. That's the way also to drive down crime in our neighbourhoods, to concentrate on neighbourhood policing. Also, number two, to remember that in tough times, the priority for London has got to be jobs. It's got to be investment in the big things that will take this city forward. And I'm thinking of transport, I'm thinking of housing, I'm thinking of the vital investments we've got to continue to make in our transport infrastructure, in our housing. We're going to build 55,000 new homes between 2011 and 2015. We think we can do about 32,000 or more new affordable homes every year. If you take the transport, the housing, the regeneration programs together, we can create 200,000 jobs, 200,000 jobs by those investments over 4 years. But it's no good just creating those jobs unless we get young Londoners ready to take them. And in the Muslim community, I think I'm right in saying that you're 3 times as likely to find young men, young people unemployed as you are across the rest of the city. That is unacceptable. We've got to make sure that we get our young people ready for work, capable, with the credentials, with the qualifications, with the aptitude for those jobs. And that's why we are making such advances on our apprenticeship programs. I want to thank all representatives of the Muslim community who work so hard in the mosques, elsewhere, with young people. Help them to get ready for work. Help them to give the energy, the discipline, the boundaries that they need. I want to be a mayor who unites London, who continues to cut council tax, who gets great value from the Olympic Games, yes, and who takes this city forward. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming along this evening. Thank you for listening, and I hope very much that I may be able to count on your support next Thursday. Thank you.
Well, can I start by saying we're back in recession, and back in a double-dip recession, something that's only happened once in my lifetime, a double-dip recession, and a recession which is actually the worst since the 1930s. And therefore, I think we can be quite clear this government's austerity measures aren't working. President Obama has had a 2.5% growth of GDP in the American economy during the same period that this government has seen our economy not just flatline, but now our economy is slightly smaller than it was when Cameron and Osborne walked into Downing Street. So we need to look at what we can do to help Londoners get through these very difficult times. One way is to put money back in people's pockets so they spend it on the local high street, in local shops, helping to sustain local jobs and the local community. And therefore, you don't do that by hiking up fares each year 2% above inflation, which is the policy that this Tory mayor is committed to each year during the next 4 years. I've made clear I will cut fares by 7% in October, using the £338 million surplus in the fares account. We'll simply put £269 million of that back in Londoners' pockets. It's about £250 a year for someone living in Zone 2. It's £1,700 over the 4 years for someone living in Zone 6. But that's almost all money that will be recycled into the local economy and help sustain employment. And that's responding to the key demand I hear every day on London streets, dozens of times a day, when people say, what can you do to help us get through these very difficult times? It's very easy for the London media to be obsessed by a small and very wealthy elite that they're in the gossip columns and the celebrity pages, but the vast majority of Londoners are struggling to get through these very difficult times. Half of Londoners live in homes with an income of under £26,000 a year. As well as cutting the fares, I will introduce an energy co-op. Over the last 4 years, energy prices for the average household have gone up £300. That energy co-op will provide energy cheaper. People simply have to transfer to the City Hall Energy Co-op. They'll save another £120 a year. We'll reinstate the EMA, the Education Maintenance Allowance, targeting the poorest students struggling to stay in education, giving them another £30 per week. And all of those things together are about helping to restore our London economy and actually get real growth. The biggest single thing is to tackle the abuses of landlords. We are getting appalling rip-off rents in this city, and we've got to start building good council homes that ordinary Londoners can afford to buy. 2/3 of all the jobs lost in this recession aren't bankers, they're in construction. It's construction that's tipped us back into recession, and yet we've got 1/3 families on our waiting list. 30 years ago, this country took a wrong turning when Thatcher stopped building council houses, and to his shame, Tony Blair carried on that ban. We will start building. My aim is 50,000 homes a year to rent. It may take a time to get there, but we can easily achieve the 35,000 that almost all the candidates are committed to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both of you for outlining your policies. We're now going to move on to the questions. The first area is Islamophobia. And I'm going to ask both of you to give me 30 seconds on what you think of Islamophobia. You've both been mayor. What is your track record in dealing with anti-Muslim hatred and discrimination? Boris.
I think Islamophobia, like any kind of prejudice in our city based on race or faith, is utterly abhorrent, and that's why I commissioned the Race and Faith Inquiry to make sure that our police service was getting it right. The MPS actually established, the Metropolitan Police established a new Muslim Communities Forum to help them to deal with the problem. And I want to be absolutely clear, I do not in any way minimise people's apprehension about Islamophobia, people's fear of it, the reality of Islamophobia, but I can tell you that in the last 12 months we are seeing progress, and we are seeing a drop of race, religious and faith crimes across the board in London by about 12.4%. And overall, and I know these statistics will be cold comfort to people who feel that they are who are the victims of Islamophobia, but it is just worth saying that there are some straws in the wind, some positive signs compared to the previous 4 years before I was mayor. There's been a 13.9% fall in race and religious offences in this city. My job, and that's why I made such a stress of neighbourhood policing, my job is to continue driving Islamophobia down and to give neighbourhoods, through the safer particular neighborhood boards a bigger say in the priorities of the neighborhood team, so that if Islamophobia is an issue in your neighborhood, with the police, then you can bring it up in the Safer Neighborhood Board.
But Boris, what's an Islamicist?
An Islamicist is I don't know, you define it.
Well, I mean, you're the one who talks about them, because in 2005 you seemed awfully concerned about them.
I see.
Let me read back to you what you said. You said, Islam is the problem. To any non-Muslim reader of the Quran, Islamophobia seems a natural reaction. That seems quite different to what you're saying now.
No, it's not. What I'm saying is that I think any kind of prejudice based on religion or on ethnicity is abhorrent. And yes, it's certainly the case that, as I remember in the last election 4 years ago, you will find plenty of things that both candidates have said that are capable of misconstruction. And certainly, as I said yesterday in at the meeting we had, you know, there are things that I would certainly phrase differently today.
So you don't think Islam is a problem now?
No.
When did Islam stop being the problem?
I think, with great respect to you, Fatima, and to your line of questioning, I don't think that you're doing justice to my views.
Like many Londoners, I'm just very confused, because in 2005 you said Islam is the problem. You also said what makes modern Islam so politically troublesome is that some Muslims can be induced to take offence at any injustice. That helps the wacko imams to warp the alienated young men into becoming suicide bombers. You're just saying very different things, so I'm just asking, at what point did Islam stop becoming the problem?
Well, I certainly think that there are some imams around the world who are capable of warping the minds of impressionable young men. I see no harm in repeating that point. It seems to be a valid point. Some of them get invited to City Hall, some of them don't. There you go. It's my view.
So you still believe all those things you said in 2005?
Well, if you keep asking me different questions here, Fatima.
That's my job.
Or rather, you keep making assertions about what you say I believe, and then asking me to.
It's from the Spectator. It's from the Telegraph. They're your words, Boris.
Well, my view is that to recapitulate, for the benefit for new viewers start here. I certainly believe that Islamophobia is abhorrent, but I also believe, for the avoidance of doubt, that sacred texts are capable of manipulation and abuse by people, by extremists who wish to whip up impressionable young men to do things that I think are also abhorrent. Will that do?
Well, I mean, you've said these things on record. Are you now going to go on record to say that? In the Spectator and in the Telegraph, as you did in 2005, saying the exact opposite.
Well, I think I'm on record now as saying what I think, and there you go.
Yeah, but you see, the problem is, Boris, the damage has already been done, because you thought then that Muslims were, in the words of your party chairman, fair game. You were part of a reservoir of hatred against Muslims. You and Melanie Phillips have fed into the creation of organisations like the EDL.
Well, I mean, I don't know why you're lumping me with Melanie Phillips, a commentator that I've actually gone out of my way to say I think is, you know, the purveyor of extremely dubious stuff. But Fatima, if this is your version of impartial chairing of this session,
I'm coming to Ken.
Then you know I might as well just withdraw now under heavy fire. But you know I stick by what I say. If you look at our record over the last 4 years, if you look at what I've done in office, if you look at the support I've given, and I know that there's more perhaps I could have done. I could have gone to more mosques. I have been to some mosques. I haven't been to every mosque. I will go if I am re-elected. Of course, I will go to the old Kent Road Mosque, number 1. I will go to others, of course, but I'll go to the old Kent Road Mosque first. And yes, as I said yesterday, we will have a programme of systematic engagement of the kind that we began yesterday, which I thought was a very good event. And if you look at the figures and you look at what we're doing to combat Islamophobia, I think there are some straws in the wind that suggest that the Met is coping with the problem a bit better. That does not mean the problem has gone away. That's all I'm saying. The problem has not gone away. It is my job to get more police out on the street, to give communities the reassurance that they need, and you can count on me as your mayor to do that.
Does that mean that you're specifically committing to engage on Islamophobia?
As I've said, not only am I specifically committed to have a task force to tackle it, but to make sure that I am available. And this is something I do reproach myself for, because I've got to be clear. I visited the East London Mosque. I went to Brick Lane. I've done speeches at Eid, but perhaps I haven't been as available as I should have been. Okay. I can see too many nods around the room at that remark.
Thank you.
That is true, but I intend to make myself more available.
Okay. Thank you, Boris. Okay. Ken, if I could just get 30 seconds from you on what you think of Islamophobia and your track record when you were mayor in dealing with anti-Muslim hatred and discrimination.
Well, I don't think Muslims should feel they're unique. In 1906, the Daily Mail had a front page saying, "Jews bring crime and disease to Britain." Then it was the turn of the Irish. As I was growing up in the city, it was the turn of blacks. Today it's the turn of Muslims. There will always be right-wing papers and right-wing politicians who exploit fear and hatred, either to sell their rubbishy papers or to garner votes. And the trouble is, it's Muslims getting it at the moment. What do we do about that? And I think I would like to see, instead of the Daily Mail filled with the poison of Melanie Phillips, and let's remember, Anders Breivik, who's now on trial for mass murder, quotes Melanie Phillips extensively with her book about Londonistan, suggesting this was a centre for terrorism. And David Cameron's speech drew attention when he was talking about robust liberalism, drew the remarks of the former Prime Minister of Norway warning David Cameron that the sort of remarks he was making stirred the fears of people like Anders Breivik. So you've got to be very careful. I would like to think that readers of the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph might one day read those amazing lines from the last sermon of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which are like a template for modern London. Where he says, God created you in tribes and nations, not that you will fight, oppress, occupy, convert or terrorise, but that you'll get to know one another. That could be the template for London today. How many Londoners ever heard those words? And I have to confess, I only knew of them for the first time last year. And if that is my confession, I say I hope at the end of another 4 years we'll have done more to bring all Londoners to a better understanding of each other's faiths.
The thing is, Ken, you talk the talk. It sounds good. You want London to be a beacon that demonstrates the words of the Prophet. That plays well in the mosques, and it's served Labour well in the past, but that's not the case anymore. And I put it to you, actually, the era of backslap and bluster with community leaders is over. What we want from you is action, and we haven't heard a single thing of that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got more applause quoting those lines from the sermon, the last sermon, when we were addressing London's Muslim and gay hustings, Boris and myself and the other candidates there. And Muslims have been told, many gays and lesbians have been told, Muslims are a threat to you, Muslims are intolerant, so on. Yet the applause there went on longer than anywhere else when I've quoted those lines.
Yeah, but applause is all very well, but what about the action? What are you going to do?
Well, remember what I did. I established Eid in Trafalgar Square, a real breakthrough. Because it isn't just for Muslims to celebrate Eid, it's for Londoners to see that taking place in the same way that many Londoners come to Chinese New Year who aren't Chinese. We commissioned research into Islamophobia in the media, which brought a torrent of abuse, which detailed, I think it was 90% of all stories about Islam and Muslims in our media were hostile. You get one nutty imam, and of course there are nutty imams, and they can have 10 minutes on the Today programme ranting on because they just abused the Home Secretary. But nobody reported the Baptist minister in America who said he regretted more Londoners hadn't died in the suicide bombings in July 2005 because we tolerated homosexuals. I've never seen the press go mad about the American rabbi who said 1,000 Arab lives aren't worth a Jewish fingernail. Yes, there's a handful of mad extremists at the end of every religion, but none of them represent what the teachings of Rabbi Hillel or the teachings of Jesus Christ or the Prophet Muhammad.
But you're very vocal about extremism, but some people might argue that by allying yourself closely with certain Muslim groups over others, you make the problem worse.
No, I've never dealt with a Muslim group that worked with a Muslim group I didn't feel wanted to be part of our wider community. I've debated with Muslim groups who were supporting the caliphate. In my own constituency, when I was an MP, we had about 500 young Muslims turned up. They made the case for a caliphate. I made the case for a Western-style democracy. I won by about 10 to 1. You challenge those that want to roll us back, but you work with those that want to take us forward. I don't see these London mosques as some dangerous group of Muslims. I think it's deeply embedded in the community. And if it is, well, Prince Charles was unlikely to have opened it, you know.
I'm going to have to move on to the next area, which is policy. Now, as you both know, many Muslim Londoners live in some of the most deprived areas of London. What policies are you going to put in place to help with deprivation specifically? Boris?
I think number one, as I said in my opening remarks, is unemployment and the tragedy of so many young Muslims, and as I say, 3 times more Muslims are likely to be unemployed, 18 to 24-year-olds, than across the rest of society. That cannot be tolerated, and that is why I'm focusing now in the next 4 years on everything, all the chain of causation that leads young people to be unemployed. And it begins with illiteracy at the age of 11, and look at what happened in the riots of last August. So many of those kids who got involved in that violence and destruction did not have the educational attainments that you would expect of London kids. It continues with apprenticeships and getting them into work. I want to focus on getting our young people ready for work. And so we're going to have a massive programme of engagement with young people, working with all the voluntary organisations that there are across London, through Team London, through the apprenticeship scheme, to get people ready for work. I read a story in the paper today about a guy who'd rung 7. What was it? There were 7 people he'd rung to who were meant to be coming to turn up to work, who didn't make it because they basically didn't have the inclination to get there. And what worries me is that so many of our young people don't have the confidence, don't have the skills, don't have the right training to get and hold down jobs. And so an apprenticeship is something that will give them the competitive spirit, the understanding of what it's like to be in a workplace that will then enable them to succeed and to remain in that workplace. And 85% of the people that we have got into apprenticeships stay there, and keep in full-time work. That's an absolute priority. The second thing is housing. And there is a massive shortage of housing in London now. Huge numbers of people cannot find anywhere to live near their place of work. And this particularly affects Muslim communities where we need substantial quantities of family housing. We need large quantities of family housing. That's why our programme involves building tens of thousands of new units every year. But I put in, for the first time in the London plan, a stipulation that 42% of our affordable housing must be for 3 bedrooms or more. It must be for 3 bedrooms or more in order to accommodate the needs of larger families. And those programmes, as I say, of housing and transport investments will create 200,000 jobs. The housing programme alone creates 104,000 jobs. You're starting to see things turning around. I've just been talking to house builders, to apprenticeship schemes in London. You're starting to see more people taking on young Londoners. I want to accelerate that progress over the next 4 years.
How many houses are you going to build, Boris?
We will build roughly 32.5 affordable homes. We will build roughly 32,500 a year, and we'll do that by bringing together all the land of all the publicly owned land, 530 hectares. We're going to create an agency called Homes for London, and that agency will put our public land, the old LDA land, the old HCA land, out there for development, and we think we can deliver record quantities of affordable housing. And by the way, we've already done record quantities over the last 4 years.
Okay. Ken, on deprivation, please.
I think that the single most important thing is that house building programme. Because if you think before Thatcher stopped council house building, we built 50,000 homes for rent, in addition to what was being built privately for sale. If we start a programme like that and lock in, because there's enough land, brownfield sites, no greenbelt, no parks, no back gardens to build 250,000 homes, there's a decade of land available for building. What you clearly aren't going to get is the government come up with £50 billion, which is what it would cost to build, say, 500,000 homes, and therefore you've got to look at the pension funds. Pension funds are investing in stocks and shares. If you've got a private sector pension fund and you retire as the stock market crashes, you may only get half the pension you expected for the rest of your life. I'll be saying to pension funds, invest in something secure, housing that you'll own, but pass to a local council or housing association to manage. Getting that sort of scale of construction, because it is construction that tipped us back into recession. And the next thing, as Boris touched on, is apprenticeships. Basically, let's be clear, an awful lot of the apprenticeships being kicked around these days is but really work experience. When I left school, almost every boy got an apprenticeship. After 3 or 4 or 5 years, you got a full-time job in that organisation. And we will establish, and I can't give you a number off the top of my head, you've got to be in office to actually work it out.
Ken, where's the money coming from for EMA?
Well, the EMA, we talked to the local colleges in London. Colleges have some £30 million of unallocated funds. Some of it, charitable donations that they had and, legacies from people who died and left the money. Universities in London have £100 million. And there are boroughs like Hackney who will suddenly have a lot more money. When I cut the fares, the charge they have to pay for the freedom pass is cut. So London boroughs will get £22 million more back in their pockets. Hackney wants to put that in. So there's more than enough there. What we need is the London-wide administration to distribute it, and that's what the City Hall should be doing.